Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Shyaonti Talwar, and I welcome you to yet another session in which we are going to discuss the poem A Prayer for My Daughter by the very well known legendary poet W.B. Yeats. So, before we go to the poem, a quick background of the poet. Yeats was born in 1865 and he died in the year 1939. He was of Irish origin. He was an Irish national, and he's the national poet of Ireland actually. And he was not only a poet, he was also a dramatist and a prose writer. He was a very prolific writer and one of the most prominent and foremost figures of 20th century literature. In the year 1923, Yeats was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. And in fact, what occupied or what fascinated Yeats was his lifelong interest in mysticism, spiritualism. Spiritualism is to do with the spirits. That is, what I mean by spirits is not spirituality, but spiritualism, which means spirits or otherworldly beings, that is, supernatural beings. Occultism, which is also an area to do with the supernatural, and astrology. And one thing that defined Yeats's work and it kept reflecting in all his works was his unrequited love for Maud Gonne, his the love of his life. But the two really didn't have that kind of a relationship, right? They could never be together in the real sense of the term, as in together, right? So that separation, that anguish which ate into Yeats throughout his life, because somehow the woman he loved uh, was not with him for whatever reasons, uh, kept surfacing in his poetry. We sense this anguish in every work of his, and especially in this poem. So, a little about the poem. This poem was written in 1919, but it was published only in 1921. And this is written, in fact, in the context of the birth of his daughter. And Yeats is, in fact, offering this poem as a prayer for his daughter with Georgia Hyde Lees, who is the woman he married after he was refused and rejected by Maud Gonne. And Yeats writes this poem while staying in a tower at Thur Balili during the Anglo-Irish War. So it was the time when Ireland was fighting for its independence from England. So it was the time of the Irish National War, or the Irish War of Independence, or it's even called the Anglo-Irish War. And this is where Yeats was staying. It is a tower. It is quite an isolated kind of building, and this is where Yeats is staying and he's writing the poem. Right? This poem is also an important work of modernist poetry, and it reflects Yeats's complicated views on Irish nationalism, his own uh, anguish as a father, his concern for his daughter, and also his view about women. And like we will see, very typically he brings in myth, he brings in characters, especially female characters, and a lot of symbols from Greek mythology, and he embeds them in his poem to kind of make his message more tangible and more understandable. So let's look at the poem. The poem is a very long one, so we'll take it one stanza at a time. So the very start of the poem, the very at the very outset, what Yeats does is he creates a setting. There's a certain setting. Uh, so it's a stormy night, and there's a storm which is raging, and this tower where he's living, it's somewhere close to the woods, and then it's also close to the sea, so he can sense the sea waves crashing, and then yeah, there's a kind of it's a kind of there's a kind of foreboding and a kind of gloom. It is not a very pleasant environment. So like when you watch a movie, the moment there's a storm, there's a thunderstorm, there's lightning and a thunderstorm, you know that something is going to happen now, right? Either someone is going to be murdered, or there's a ghost which is going to come out, or maybe someone is going to be attacked. So it's a similar kind of an atmosphere which is built right from the start of the poem. So the lines go like this: Once more, the storm is howling, and half hid under this cradle hood and coverlid, my child sleeps on. So outside, there's a storm that is howling, okay? But inside the tower, the child is protected and she's sleeping and she's half hid. So she's covered in a lot of clothes, a lot of warm wear, because obviously it's very cold. And his child is sleeping very peacefully, oblivious of the storm that is raging outside. Now, the storm is not just a physical storm. It is not only the rain that is lashing or the storm that is howling. The storm is symbolic of the war that is going on, the Anglo Irish War. And the child has taken birth in such turbulent times, in such uncertain times where nations are warring with each other. So he's also referring to that bigger political storm, right? The war. He's actually, by the storm, he means the war. There is no obstacle but Gregory's Wood and one bare hill, whereby the haystack and roof leveling wind bred on the Atlantic can be stayed. So he says there's not much of a barricade between the storm and where I am staying with my daughter. So, in other words, he's trying to say that very soon the storm will hit us. Now, here again, he's talking about the war. He says, how long can I protect my daughter from the dangers that are surrounding us? So, though he's an Irish national and he should be very happy with the whole Irish War of Independence, here we find Yeats very pensive and apprehensive, probably because he's worried for his daughter's sake. And he says, how long can I keep her from the war? How long can I stand between her and the storm that is raging outside? And then he goes on to say, and for an hour, for a whole hour, I have walked and prayed because of the great gloom that is in my mind. So I have walked and I have prayed. So he can't even sit down. When people are tense, they keep pacing up and down. So that's what he's been doing. He has been pacing up and down, and he has prayed and prayed, and he has walked and he has prayed, because he just can't escape from the gloom, the depression, the sorrow that is welling up inside him, the tension that is growing inside him. So that's the opening stanza of the poem. Now we'll come to know what are the things that are actually making him so nervous, so pensive, so pessimistic, and so cynical. So moving on to the second stanza, now he again repeats. If you see, he repeats the some of the phrases from the previous stanza. He says, "I have walked and prayed for this young child an hour, and heard the sea wind scream upon the tower." So, as he's walking and praying, what is the background noise that he can hear? What is the background? What is happening in the background? It's the sea wind that is screaming upon the tower. So, it's just because the tower is built of stone and it's very sturdy and rock solid that it is offering a kind of protection. So, again, he's telling us that maybe the tower can withstand an attack by nature. But how will the tower withstand the war, and under the arches of the bridge, and scream in the elms above the flooded stream? So it is as if the sea wind is everywhere. It has engulfed the whole landscape. So it is upon the tower, it is under the bridge, it is in the trees, the elm trees, and it is also in the waters that is gushing, that is the flooded stream, the streams that are overflowing with water. So the sea wind is everywhere. So, like the sea wind, it's actually the war that is slowly taking over entire regions, that is slowly affecting and spreading to entire regions. And along with the war, it is also the threat to life, the danger to life that is spreading. Imagining in excited reverie that the future years had come, dancing to a frenzied drum out of the murderous innocence of the sea. So he says, how is the sea wind screaming? Now, this is an instance of personification because he is attributing human qualities to inhuman entities, natural elements. So the sea wind is screaming like a human being, and the sea wind is screaming because apparently it is excited. Why is it excited? Because it has an exciting dream. It is imagining that future where Ireland will be independent, right? And it is as if the wind is dancing to a frenzied drum. Frenzied is where you play the drums like crazy. So that is when, so drums are the drum rolls of victory, of yeah, of success, of jubilation, of celebration. So why are these drums beating? Because Ireland is going to be independent, and the sea wind is screaming and it is dancing to these frenzied drum beats because it is anticipating the independent future. And all this is rising from the murderous innocence of the sea. So, what is the sea like? Now, here it's a paradox. The sea is innocent and wicked at the same time. Murderous, implying some evil aspect. Innocence is where he says the sea is innocent. So, murderous innocence. So, clearly, we look at his ambivalent position as regards the Irish War of Independence. We are not really sure how he feels about it, right? Because he thinks it is murderous and it is also innocent. It is just and it is unjust both. Now, what is the prayer? Now, this was setting the context, right? With the storm raging and the sea wind screaming and the sea howling and the wind howling and the war going on and the threat he anticipates. Now, let us look at what he wants for his daughter, the prayer that he offers for his daughter. So, here he says, may she be granted beauty, and yet not beauty to make a stranger's eye distraught, or hers before a looking glass. So he says, I do want my daughter to be beautiful. Which father will not want his daughter to be beautiful, right? I do want her to be beautiful, but not so beautiful that the moment someone looks at her, they are distraught. They forget everything. They forget their commitments, their higher goals, and they just keep looking at her. As in, they fall helplessly in love with her. So, I don't want her to be that beautiful. Or, for that matter, even that when she looks at her reflection in the mirror, she falls in love with herself. That she also can't focus on anything other than her looks or her external appearance, because he feels there is a danger in being over beautiful. There's a danger in being too beautiful. For such, being made beautiful over much. So, if you are too beautiful, you might consider beauty a sufficient end. So, when you're too beautiful, beautiful becomes the goal of your life. You do not want to do anything else in life because you're already beautiful. Your life goes around how beautiful you are and the way people look at you. And when that becomes your objective, that becomes your goal in life, you lose your natural kindness, you lose empathy, you lose compassion, you forget to be a human being, you become so conceited, you become so proud. So, you lose natural kindness and maybe the heart revealing intimacy that chooses right and never find a friend. So, he says the problem with a woman being too beautiful is that she might have to forego love, because no one wants to love that kind of a woman who is so beautiful, who is like a goddess, because people will always admire her, people will always be in awe of her, right? So that heart revealing intimacy, the human experience, the intense human emotion of love, of intimacy, where you that which prompts you to choose your partner, to choose the man you want to spend the rest of your life with, that may be foregone. That this beautiful woman may be deprived of because she's too beautiful. She's too beautiful to become someone's lover, or become someone's friend, or even become someone's wife or companion. So he says, I want my daughter to be beautiful, but not too beautiful. So let us also consider over here that after all, Yeats is a man who is writing about women. So the first thing he focuses on is the appearance of a woman, and he presumes that all men, uh, to begin with, fall for beauty in a woman. So, in that sense, it's quite a reductionist analysis also, where Yeats is just talking about the physical appearance. So, the first thing he prays is that my daughter should not be too beautiful, and he lists. He gives you a list of the things that can go wrong if a woman is too beautiful, right? And then he brings us examples from mythology as to what actually happened when women were too beautiful. Apparently, he's trying to give us an argument that beautiful women often make mistakes. They often get tempted to make mistakes. So, here he gives us the example of Helen of Troy. Helen, being chosen, found life flat and dull. So, Helen was already somebody's queen. She was a mother. And even then, she chose to be with Paris. She fled her kingdom with Paris, who was a prince from another kingdom. Now, there are some myths which say that Paris took Helen by force, and there are some myths which say that Helen ran off. She eloped with Paris, leaving her husband and her daughter behind, which is what led to the whole Trojan War. So, here he is probably going by that myth which says that Helen fled with Paris, and he says that though Helen had everything, she was the queen, and she was beautiful, and she was a mother, she was loved by her husband, she was a wife. Still, she found her life boring. She wanted something interesting. Probably she wanted a younger lover, and that is why she fled with Paris, and that led to the whole Trojan War, which in which so many people lost their lives for nothing. So she uh, acted foolishly. That's what he's trying to tell us through Helen's example, who was too beautiful. Hmm? While that great queen that rose out of the spray, here he is referring to Venus, the goddess of beauty and love. So he says Venus, who rose out of the spray. So Venus is supposed to have risen out of the sea. Being fatherless, could have her way. She did not have a father. So there was no father to control her. And that is why she could do whatever she wanted to do. Right? And yet, what she does is she chooses a lame person, Hephaestus. She chooses to get married to a person with a limp who worked as a blacksmith for the gods, right? So he says, see the kind of mistakes women make, and then she had such an unhappy marriage because she chose the wrong man, right? It is certain. So, with these two examples, now Yeats is driving home his case against beautiful women. It's certain that fine women eat a crazy salad with their meat. So he says, so he's using the food metaphor over here, and he says that women who are very beautiful, often they will mix up some crazy salad, they do something crazy in their life, and they don't like to lead normal lives, and then everything is undone. Horn of plenty is like Akshay Patra. Like in Indian mythology, you have Akshay Patra, out of which you can keep giving food and the food never ends. Similarly, in Greek mythology, you have the horn of plenty, where apparently it's a goat's horn and it was broken by some god, and fruits, honey, nectar, food keeps flowing out of that goat's horn, and everyone can eat, and there's no shortage of food. So that's the horn of plenty. So here he is using the horn of plenty to describe how these women had an abundance of everything. They had an abundance of wealth, they had an abundance of beauty, they had an abundance of social position, and yet they made mistakes. They chose to be with men who did not deserve them. and usse, they had a problem later and they ruined their lives, which led to further complications. Like in Helen's case, it was the Trojan War. And then he goes on to say, in courtesy, I would have her chiefly learned. Hearts are not had as a gift, but hearts are earned. So just because she is beautiful does not mean that she can play with someone's feelings, someone's emotions. I will train my daughter that heart cannot be taken from someone as a gift. Heart has to be earned. So you have to love a person to be loved back. Now, here obviously he is very embittered by his whole experience with Modgon, who kept rejecting him. She was very beautiful, she was very intelligent, but she never wanted to get married to Yeats. And so, probably Yeats is venting his frustration, the frustration of his unfulfilled relationship with Modgon, by talking about how he is going to raise his daughter and teach her that she should not neglect, should not ignore anybody's emotions, and especially not emotions of people who are not entirely beautiful, right? So, probably a beautiful woman may be approached by some man who is not as good looking as her, but yet she should consider his feelings if his feelings are sincere. So she shouldn't go by appearances all the time. Yet many that have played the fool for beauty's very self has charm made wise, and many a poor man that has roved, loved, and thought himself beloved, from a glad kindness cannot take his eyes. So many a poor man has wandered, has gone astray because of beauty, and maybe he has thought that he was loved back in return, but all of it was just a charade. So never play with someone's feelings, is what he is saying in this stanza, which is clearly a kind of resentment which he's harboring against Modgon, which is coming out in the way he, in his uh, plan to raise his daughter as a very sensitive and beautiful person, a beautiful person who is also very sensitive to people who are not so good looking. Hmm? And then he goes on to say, may she become a flourishing hidden tree. So may she be like a tree. Now, a tree has roots. So clearly, Yeats wants his daughter to be rooted in tradition, to be rooted in the home and the hearth, right? And but at the same time, she should give out leaves, branches, flowers. So she should be like a tree who kind of gives protection and shade to the whole family, which is what a woman's conventional role is supposed to be, right? That all her thoughts may, like the linnet, be and have no business but dispensing round their magnanimities of sound. So he says she should be a tree, but her thoughts should be like the linnet. The linnet is a bird that sings very sweetly. So she should be a protector to her family. She should be someone who's the symbol of love and affection for her family. And at the same time, she should spread the message of joy and happiness and well being in the family. Right? And then, nor but in merriment begin a chase, nor but in merriment a quarrel. Oh, may she live like some green laurel, rooted in one dear perpetual place. So he says she should not pick up fights, she should not go after unnecessary things. Neither should she pick up a chase, nor should she pick up a quarrel. She should just be like a green laurel, as in a tree, a lovely flowering tree rooted in one dear perpetual place. So his daughter has to have a fixed position, a permanently fixed position, and that is where she should get all her nourishment from. Hmm? My mind, because the minds that I have loved, the sort of beauty that I have approved, prosper but little has dried up of late. So he says, I have made this mistake. My mind has made this mistake of approving beautiful women who haven't prospered. They haven't flowered the way they should have. Hmm. And this mind of mine is now becoming old, but yet my mind, even in its old age, even if it's in its middle age, knows that to be choked with hate, may well be of all evil chances chief. If there's no hatred in a mind, assault and battery of the wind can never tear the linnet from the leaf. So he's again referring to Modgon over here. He says Modgon is full of evil. She's full of hatred. He didn't like her political leanings. He says she is too intellectual and nothing comes out of intellectualism. It lessens the beauty of a woman. So the more you hate, the more biased you are, the stronger your opinions are, the lesser you are as I mean, the lesser your beauty. That is, of course, his opinion, right? And the linnet is destroyed. So he uses the metaphor of that small bird. He's comparing his daughter's thoughts to the bird, and he says the bird will be destroyed if you are like this, right? And intellectual hatred is the worst. So let her think opinions are a curse. So he doesn't want his daughter to have any opinions. He says uh, intellectual hatred is the worst kind of hatred. And let my daughter not have any opinions. Have I not seen the loveliest woman born? Out of the mouth of plenty's horn. So here, this is a direct reference to Modgon. How does he describe Modgon? He says, she is the loveliest woman I have ever seen who was born out of the horn of plenty, which means she has an abundance of beauty, intelligence, wealth, position, everything. But because of her opinionated mind, she bartered that horn and every good by quiet natures understood for an old bellows full of angry wind. So she gave up that horn. She gave up her abundance. She gave up her good fortune. She gave up her um, likability. And she gave up her likable nature and she bartered it. She exchanged it to get an intellectual nature and be bitter and isolated and alienated. So clearly, he does not believe in women having an opinion of any kind, right?